Two. And we are live on YouTube. Evan, it's Dr. J here. How are we doing today, man?
Hey, man. Happy Wednesday. You and I have been pulling out the research books today. We're like, hey, let's make sure we know everything as much as possible about histamine. People have been asking you, asking myself. You've done interviews with histamine experts. And what was it? The histamine chef? Is that who you chatted with?
Yeah, yep. Yasmina Yakalenstam, she's the histamine chef, and we did a podcast last year on this topic, and a lot of good stuff. We'll kind of rehash some of the key take-homes. We'll talk about getting to the root cause, and then we'll also talk about ways that we can supplement and just support histamine issues in general, more specifically.
Yeah. So what you and I were talking about off air is we don't really market ourselves necessarily as like a histamine practitioner. There's a lot of people that kind of attach the word histamine to their name or to their marketing efforts. But you and I, as we start to dig deeper and find root causes of a histamine intolerance, which we'll talk about exactly what this means, we're fixing histamine intolerance just as a side effect of doing all the other good work we're doing to support the adrenals and support the immune system and ensuring that people are free of infections and fixing neurotransmitters, like all this stuff. Oh, it just happens to fix histamine intolerance.
Exactly. Like in the functional medicine world, there is ways that you can market so you can kind of rope people in specifically because you talk to their issues. But again, if you're a really good functional medicine practitioner or clinician, you're hitting all of the body systems. So in general, you're not going to really miss anything. But there are ways that we can dive in deeper to issues such as histamine. And we're going to try to do that today. We'll kind of zone out a bit. So we have like the big picture perspective so people don't forget what the root causal things that can't be ignored are. And then we'll also talk about, palliative things we can do on top of just the functional medicine principle stuff to get even better results.
Sure. So should we start with some symptoms? What exactly people are noticing when they're coming to us and they're saying, hey, I think I have a histamine issue, and I believe it could be coming from my diet. We've got symptoms like headaches, could be anxiety, it could be your face flushing, it could be an itchy tongue, a runny nose. What else am I missing symptom-wise?
Yeah, headaches, all those different things. It could be flushing. It could be even hives or the urticaria, those wheals that come up on the skin. Those can be all, things that are happening. And again, what's histamine doing? Histamine is a neurotransmitter, and there are various receptor sites for histamine in the body. There's, H1 or histamine 1, histamine 2, 3, and 4. And again, these things can control, for instance, smooth muscle and endothelial tissue that affects blood vessels. This is what like Benadryl and like Claritin would utilize. So if you have like an allergic reaction and like your skin gets super blown up, right? That's why you do like Benadryl, right? Or histamine 2 controls acid secretion and abdominal pain. So histamine can also increase acid as well. It can also increase the heart rate. Histamine 3 has an effect on controlling the nerves, sleep, behavior, appetite. Histamine 4 has an effect on the intestines, the spleen, the colon, white blood cells, and the inflammatory response. So it's kind of like this, right? You take your hammer, you whack your thumb, and all of these different reactions then happen. Right? So you can look at all of the clotting factors and the cytokines and all of the inflammation and the white blood cell mobilization. And then if you just kind of zone back, what caused it all? The hammer. So we'll kind of zoom in, all right, what's happening in the nitty gritty, but then we'll kind of zoom out and say, okay, what's the hammer in this analogy? Because if we can focus on the hammer, it's way easier to wrap your head around, don't whack your thumb with a hammer than it is to look at all of the nitty gritty, but we'll kind of do both. So people that are looking to nerd out a little bit kind of get satisfied, and the people that just want the action items get satisfied too.
Sure. So let me just pronounce what we're actually talking about. Diamine oxidase, also known as DAO. So basically, this is an enzyme that we're making on our own in our body, which is basically just like when we're talking about proteases and lipases and lactases and different digestive enzymes. DAO is an enzyme that's basically going to it's going to seek out, like the CIA, it's going to find the bad guy, which is going to be excess histamine in your foods, and it's going to help break those down. It could be foods or beverages. So we'll talk about the alcohol component. And DAO, when it works properly, it's going to break down up to 99% of the histamine. And then there's 1% of histamine that actually enters circulation. But we'll talk about some of the root causes here that could be going on with the gut. When you're deficient in DAO, which is why you can supplement with it, which Justin told me off air. He goes, man, this stuff is sold out everywhere. But when you're supplementing with it or you're fixing the root causes and you're getting your DAO enzyme to be back in adequate amounts, you're able to break down the histamine and you no longer have histamine intolerance, which is why people can take DAO supplements and they can feel better, but you've always got to work back to the root cause of other issues. Why is this not working in the first place?
Yeah, there's also this DAO, which is diamine oxidase, and there's also another one called HNMT, histamine N-methyltransferase, and these both have an effect of breaking down histamine. So if we take off our functional medicine root cause hat and we put on our palliative natural medicine hat, we want to just control symptoms. Well, we can give enzymes like DAO, which have been back ordered for a year. They're typically extracted from kidney or thymus tissue and big back order for a while, but we can give those to help lower histamine, right? Because that enzyme helps break histamine down. So, you know, it's like someone that has a lactose intolerance issue. They may take a lactate, which is milk enriched with lactase, the enzyme, right, to break down the milk sugar, and then they have less diarrhea. So kind of it's that perspective where we're adding in the enzyme to be able to break things down, which can be helpful from a palliative perspective. Number two, we can make sure we have all the nutrients required to make a lot of these enzymes. So like the HNMT enzyme, we need SAMe. Right? We need SAMe, acetylenolmethionine, which is really important for MTHFR. The diamine oxidase, we also need B6, we need copper, some of these other enzymes too for histamine processing, right? We need B2, we need iron, we need B5, right? And a lot of these nutrients we're also going to deplete with adrenal dysfunction too. So you can see how adrenal issues and low histamine can be affected. Yep. Anytime you see B vitamins, we know how important healthy gut bacteria is for producing B vitamins. So you can see if we have a dysbiosis or a SIBO, or we have food allergens driving inflammation, driving leaky gut, and or gastrointestinal permeability, that can all affect our ability to make enzymes to lower and process histamine.
Well said. So any gut infection, I mean, Justin and I, that's one of the things that we work on so much because it's so common. You've probably heard our stories, but you know, I had H. pylori, I had parasites, I had bacterial overgrowth, I had yeast, and all of that's driving leaky gut. So if you've got something like H. pylori, for example, which we see every single week on lab results when we're looking at people, the H. pylori is going to suppress the stomach acid. And so if you've got undigested food, even that alone could be causing leaky gut, therefore causing low DAO, therefore causing you to have quote unquote histamine intolerance. So if you work with a practitioner on histamine, we'll talk about the diet piece in a second, but you've got to get the gut in a healthy spot. You've got to fix the diet, making sure that the gluten is out of the diet or anything that's going to be causing a leaky gut situation. Otherwise, you're just setting yourself up for failure. And then surprisingly enough, which maybe you know more about this than I do, but it's interesting that a lot of these medications, I don't know the mechanism, but like antidepressants like Cymbalta, Prozac, Zoloft, you've got the immune modulators like Humira and Enbrel, you've got the metoprolol, the beta blockers, you've got Zyrtec and Benadryl. All of these things are causing the DAO enzyme to become deficient. I mean, I guess the mechanism isn't too important, but it is interesting. Do you have any idea?
I think some of the mechanism is pretty straightforward. A lot of it's just via nutrient deficiencies. A lot of these medications create nutrient deficiencies, and a lot of these nutrient deficiencies revolve primarily around B vitamins and minerals. So it makes sense if we create deficiency with B vitamins and minerals. Of course, that's going to create more issues. I mean, it's like blood pressure. You look at the beta blockers or the water pills like the hydrochlorothiazide or the Lasix. Yep. They're diuretics, but they create deficiencies with potassium and magnesium, which are really important for blood pressure. So you can see how a lot of these drugs actually can make the problem worse. It's an amazing business model if you're only looking at, you know, the money factor, but if you're looking at fixing the root cause like we are, it's definitely not good.
Agreed.
So we want to really back up.
Mm-hmm. Well said. You want to talk about diet?
Just to kind of back out just a little bit. We talked about the nutrient deficiencies, right? We talked about medications, antibiotics, antacids, antihistamines, right? We talked about well, I'm going to add it, nutrient stressors. So if we have more stress, more adrenal stress, more fatigue, poor sleep, inflammatory diet, that's going to drive more, higher increase in histamine. If we have hormonal imbalances, whether we're estrogen dominant or whether we have adrenal dysfunction, right? Imbalance in our stress hormones, cortisol, rhythm issues, a lot of that's going to be driven by a lot of these lifestyle stressors. And that's going to really create more histamine issues. Now, I always back up. How do I know someone has a histamine issue? Well, do they have any of those histamine symptoms we mentioned in the beginning? Because we know histamine does a few things. It helps increase heartbeat. It helps with gastric acid secretion. It opens the blood vessels, hence why when you get allergies or allergic reaction, you swell. It helps increase bronchodilation. It helps with gut permeability. It increases adrenaline. But if people get headaches or flushed or rashes or headaches with higher histamine foods, we definitely take notice. And those higher histamine foods, a big one is going to be fermented foods. Do you get worse with fermented foods? Do things like teas create, problems? If you have bone broth, does that create problems? Does citrus fruits create problems? Do meats over, a day or two old create problems? Does chocolate and coffee create problems? So if we start seeing issues with some of those symptoms, I really look a little bit closer to see what could be the driving factor.
Yeah, I'll list off a couple more too. Kombucha, that's going to be popular for our crowd, our community. Yogurts, even if it's like a grass-fed yogurt, your sauerkrauts, if you're having flare-ups, I've had some women that say they have flare-ups on their skin after doing sauerkraut. That's a sign right there. And then the alcohol too. So wine, beers, champagnes, even if it's organic wine, it's not going to matter. Cured meats, so salami could be pepperoni. The beloved bacon could be an issue, unfortunately, for the time being. You mentioned the citrus fruit, aged cheese, and then nuts, walnuts, cashews, peanuts, avocados. I don't know if it was histamine, but I had something going on where I had to pull out avocados for like 6 weeks. I was having headaches from them. It was no other foods. It wasn't any other nuts and seeds, but I believe I'm going to guess a histamine issue, because why else would avocados give me a headache?
Oh, exactly. Yeah, totally.
I was abusing them. I was doing them like every day. They're so good and so easy to add to a meal. So
totally. And then we also have things like mast cell activation disorder, right? Because histamine's produced by mast cells. So you get these like basophils, which are like in our white blood cells, right? They're like one of the smallest amount of their white blood cells are basophils. And when these basophils go into our bloodstream, into our tissue, they become mast cells. And these mast cells are what produce histamine. All right. So then you have this thing called like mast cell activation disorder. So like the more inflamed you become, right, the more your body tends to dysfunction, and you get more names for that kind of inflammation, whether it's IBD or IBS or mast cell activation disorder, or some type of, allergic issue or some type of autoimmune issue. You can just go through all the different names. The more inflamed someone gets, the more symptoms, and basically diseases are nothing more than grouping a constellation of symptoms together. That's why it's funny when people tell me, I just need a diagnosis. I just need a diagnosis. Well, a diagnosis is nothing more than someone in the medical field taking a set of symptoms that have been, traced for, many, many years into a disease name that someone studied and published. But it doesn't do anything. It just basically groups these symptoms together. And maybe there's a drug for it, which is typically how a disease, gets named, because there's a drug or a treatment for it for the most part. Yeah. But in the end, does it really help you fix the issue? A lot of times, no. But it gives people relief to know that it's something. But again, if you're depressed and you're stuck on antidepressants your whole life, well, do you really feel good about that if you're not fixing the issue? Maybe not.
Right. And I had the diagnosis of IBS, right?
Yes.
Which meant we have no idea what's going on, but here's some acid blockers. I was never talked to about the root cause ever. So for me, if you're seeking a diagnosis, I would just let that attachment go, because you really don't need a term for the symptoms. We just need to figure out what's going on. So you mentioned the diet piece. We hit the gut piece. We hit the
adrenal and hormone piece a little bit too, I think.
Say that again.
We hit the adrenal and hormone piece too.
Yeah, adrenals, that's very important. So how should we go about this? I mean, we've put all the pieces on the table. Now, how should we arrange this kind of step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Diet first?
Yeah, so off the bat, I would say look at like kind of like your histamine bucket or your stress bucket. Everything goes in that bucket. Some people, it just sucks. They're brought into this world with a poor genetic constitution and their bucket's smaller. What that means is they just can't tolerate as much stuff. That means, hey, if they got a little bit of gluten and a little bit of stress, their bucket's full. Some people can have a lot more things. They could have some medications in there, some stress, some sleep, some poor food, some nutrient deficiency, and then maybe their symptoms start to increase. Now, again, over time, we naturally have a smaller bucket over time because our hormones become less restorative the older we get. So we just want to make sure that we know that there's this bucket mindset, and the more we take stressors out of the bucket, we can make a small bucket. We can add more space to it. So someone that's got a big bucket, but it's 3/4 full, well, if we have a smaller bucket that's 100% empty, we may create more resiliency for us, even though our bucket genetically is smaller. So we have control. We're not victims. We just got to be honest with ourselves. If we got a small bucket, we just got to be on point more frequently. So we do that by working on blood sugar stability. We do that with a baseline paleo template that you can work on customizing with your functional medicine doc, regarding what that looks like macro-wise and whether or not you have to add an extra digestive support to be able to break down the proteins and fats. That's important. We can look at the hormones. If there's significant hormone or adrenal issues, we got to work on it because that helps improve our ability to regulate blood sugar, inflammation, and stress. And then we also got to look at our hormones too. If we have significant hormonal imbalances, we may have to work on supporting that so we can develop our healthier cycle or healthier anabolic hormones so we can put on muscle and recover. And then, of course, this goes without saying, gut issues. Because if we have dysbiosis, leaky gut, we have chronic infections like H. pylori or blasto or crypto or Entamoeba histolytica or Giardia, any of these parasites are going to create leaky gut. They're going to create more nutrient deficiencies. And a lot of these nutrient deficiencies are needed to make healthy DAO or HNMT enzymes to break down histamine. And these enzymes these nutrients also help make healthy nutrients for our detoxification system as well.
Well said. So you got to get tested. That's our philosophy. Test, don't guess. I mean, you could probably fix maybe 50% of the issue just by working with a good nutritionist or a practitioner that's going to help you dial in the diet, right? Just getting that piece started. Even if you're closer to an AIP approach, you're already going to be eliminating a lot of the problematic foods, including alcohol. So if you're working with a nutritionist, you may get 50% there, but to get fully better, adrenals, test them. We're going to run the stool panel. We're going to look for infections that way. We're going to look for a lot of problems on the organic acids too. Fungus, yeast, Clostridia bacteria, detox problems. I mean, all of that is a factor. So there's never going to be just one silver bullet. If somebody tries to sell you my online histamine course and there's like one silver bullet they're promoting, I would be skeptical because like any topic we discussed, there's 20, 30, maybe 50 factors that all need to be factored into that pie chart, which is the pie chart being your problem. How is that problem broken down? Maybe it's 50% adrenals for one person, but it could be 5% adrenals for another person. If they've got a super positive attitude about it, that could change things too.
Exactly. So we fix the nervous system stimulation, the stress, that's the diet and lifestyle. That's also the adrenals. We fix the gut bacterial imbalance, which could be infections. It could be just low beneficial bacteria. We cut out the high histamine foods. We cut out the histamine blocking, the DAO blocking foods, coffee, tea, etc. And we try to add lower histamine paleo foods in the meantime, which typically are going to be low sugar fruit that's citrus free. Typically vegetables are going to be okay. Typically fresh meats are going to be okay. Healthy fats, maybe minus avocado, are going to be okay. Avoid the aged meats and the fermented foods for a period of time. But as we get the gut healed and we fix these issues, we should be able to get better and better and better. And then there are also additional supplements we can add in as well that can make a difference. So in my line, we use one called Allerclear that I formulated that has things like stinging nettle. It's got bromelain, potassium bicarb. These are things that have been used for a long time to help lower histamine naturally. Big fan of that. Let's see, what else can we do on top of that? I got my list here. Quercetin, like I mentioned, vitamin C, these are in Allerclear as well that help lower histamine levels naturally. Lots of good research on that. Grapefruit seed extract and pycnogenol, which are in these kind of category of oligomeric proanthocyanidins, which are these kind of antioxidant bioflavonoids and some of these really good fruits that can be helpful. We have green tea, again, can be a natural antihistamine, but can also be a DAO blocker. So you got to take that with a grain of salt. Magnesium can also be very helpful. Stinging nettle can be helpful. Omega-3 fatty acids can be helpful. Some essential oils, peppermint, lavender, lemon can also be helpful. Again, but be careful because some of them are citrus there. Just got to test it out. And of course, a lot of the herbs to help knock down dysbiosis can help in the long run. So like the berberines and the golden seal can also be very helpful as well. So a lot of different alternatives there. Any other comments or concerns, Evan?
Yeah, I'm guessing some of the medicinal mushrooms could help too. I'm not too familiar on the exact mechanism, but I'm assuming things like reishi, cordyceps mushrooms, I'm guessing those may help too, depending on how they were grown, of course, would probably make a difference. Modulating the immune system can be helpful.
Absolutely. Is there any other questions or comments you want to add before we start hitting up some of our listeners' questions?
I don't think so. Let's hit the questions. I'm going to pull them up so I can see here too.
Cool. Yeah. And if you guys put any comments in the live chat, if you can kind of keep the questions kind of pertinent to the topic, that always helps. And again, right now, if we're answering your question and you like it, give us a thumbs up right now. Give us a share. Give us a like. We appreciate it. We get really pumped and motivated because of it.
Should you should you introduce us? I mean, I don't know. Maybe we've got new people that don't even know. Who are these two guys talking about histamine all of a sudden? Should we briefly do that?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Tell us who you are.
Well, I'm Dr. Justin Marchegiani, functional medicine specialist, functional medicine doc. And again, I see patients all over the world, and we work on chronic health issues from hormone to gut to detox to autoimmune issues. And, we're trying to always get to the root cause. So that's me.
Absolutely. I'm Evan Brand, functional medicine practitioner. And Justin and I have been doing this hustle on the podcast for several years. We've got hundreds of episodes together. And I also work virtually with people via Skype and phone. And we do the live thing because we get comments like this. So let's dive in.
And we're the real deal. We don't got a script here. We're on the fly, taking our clinical knowledge and plugging it into you guys, so you guys, the listeners, can get healthier, which is our purpose here.
Yep.
So off the bat, a couple of things. I just saw here Dale made a comment here about toxic mold. So yeah, I'll connect Dale's comment to toxic mold. But yeah, mold definitely can be a stressor that can fill up that histamine bucket.
Yeah.
So of course, so things that we use to help with mold is number one, good quality air filtration. If the house is really bad with mold, we got to get that remediated, maybe even move depending on how bad it is. I never have someone move unless they leave their house for a week or two and they're like, oh my God, all of my issues got so much better. And again, we just got to be careful, because if you're leaving for a week or two, it may be on maybe a vacation where you're not.
Yeah.
So we got to kind of like control those variables. So maybe you get a hotel room or you go somewhere else and you work outside of the house for a week. But if you notice significant improvement, there could be a mold issue. So air filtration can be good. Do that little 1 to 2 week test that I mentioned, and binders such as modified citrus pectin, zeolite, activated charcoal, liposomal glutathione. These are all great things to use. A lot of the nutrients to help improve phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification. So in my line, we use Liver Supreme or antioxidant Supreme, or we'll do detox aminos, which have a lot of those phase 1 and phase 2 nutrients. So that's very helpful there.
Good. I just want to double comment on that. With the recent hurricanes that have hit people in Florida, Georgia, Texas, all the other states affected, this mold issue is probably going to be a lot bigger. A lot of people will probably try to remediate their own mold. One of my wife's friends down in Texas posted a picture of her car that got flooded in Houston. Her entire car, I believe it was leather, maybe a fake leather, her entire car was covered in mold. It looked like a lab experiment. So,
oh my gosh, that sounds terrible.
Yeah. So if there's mold there, please, please, please don't try to mitigate that stuff unless you've got like proper mask and all of that, because you can make yourself sick.
Totally. Couple questions here. What are the best herbs for parasites? Again, I would go look at some of our parasite podcasts where we dive into it. Again, in my line, we have GI Clear 1 through 6 that we use for herbs to help knock down these infections. Evan has some similar ones in his line as well. So you can check out either Evan's site at evanbrand.com or mine at justinhealth.com for more information on that by clicking on the store button.
Yeah, I'll hit the second part of that question there. Are herbs usually enough to beat up parasites? The answer is yes. We do not prescribe drugs. herbs is what we use for bugs. And yes, bacteria, fungus, yeast, parasites, with the right protocol, the right approach, all the other factors, yes, you can successfully get rid of it. I'm a success story. Justin's a success story.
Yeah.
And, you know, thousands of people under our belts that we've been able to successfully eradicate parasites with herbs.
And just to highlight one thing, I think you put it in there, but just to make sure any new listeners don't assume it, we're also factoring in diet and lifestyle changes into that, because that has a massive effect on changing and making the immune system more resilient, which has a huge effect on decreasing the chance of reinfection too.
Yep. Well said. Well said. Yeah. You can't just take a bunch of magic pills. You've got to do the hard work too, which is putting that fork to your plate with good food on it, is organic as much as possible.
Totally. 100%. And then again, some people here talking about H. pylori and SIBO and eradicating H. pylori. They still have stomach issues. So I'll connect this person's question to the issue. But if you have SIBO and H. pylori, does that go into your histamine bucket? Yes. So these type of critters and infections can increase that histamine bucket, which can create more histamine reactions like Evan and I talked earlier. And the breathing issues and the burping constantly, yeah, those are all symptoms of that. And that can all drive histamine problems. So we got to get to the root cause of those infections. And again, I refer you back to our H. pylori or SIBO podcast, where we spend a full hour talking about that one topic.
Yep. Well said. Get that tested, get that treated. Rosalind, she has itchy skin, scalp. Is that a symptom of too much histamine in the body? Always itchy. What would you say? Sounds like probably.
I mean, it could be a histamine issue. It could also be just a fungal issue too. Seborrheic dermatitis, what affects the scalp like that, or AKA dandruff, and that can be fungal in nature. So I would just look at just the whole gut biome imbalance and or histamine as a byproduct of that, right? Remember I gave you the hammer and the thumb analogy, right? The histamine is just the collateral damage caused by the hammer, right? That's kind of the whole idea. But yes, it could definitely be part of it, but more than likely not the whole thing.
Yeah, Kelly had a question. Thoughts on the Viome test, worth the money? So Viome's a pretty new company who's running stool testing. I met the guy who created the test. I've had a few clients who have had that run and they sent it to me, and the readout is terrible. I hope they improve on it, but currently I've had a few clients send me their readouts. It's crap. There's a bunch of information, but there's no real
Not
action.
actionable, right?
Yeah, it's not actionable at all.
Yeah.
It's just too much data. So Kelly, I do not use, and Justin, neither of us use the Viome test. We use more functional tests that are available through practitioners, which I like the idea of Viome, give people the power to get their own testing, but we still are going to use other companies like the GI Map on our clients.
Exactly. But the biggest issue is like you get companies that are trying to like give you more information. They're trying to like dazzle you with all this information, but then you sit back and you're like, what the hell can I actually do with it? Like,
Yep.
What lifestyle change, what diet change, what supplement, what can I eradicate? What can I support or balance based on this information that will help my patient get better? That's always the question. And then the second question is, well, does this test allow me to leverage my patient to make an action to allow them to get healthier? And if I don't get one or two, if I don't get an answer for one primarily and maybe two, then it becomes not worth it. It's just kind of, glittery, it's very like kind of like glittery and flashy, flashy. And it's like, ooh, look at this, but it doesn't really do much for me.
Yep. Should we hit James' question?
Yeah, let's hit it.
Yeah, so James put friend's 9-year-old son's on a new drug, which I looked it up here, Spinraza, for spinal muscular atrophy. And it's a brand new drug. It looks like December 2016. It was the first drug approved for this disorder. Now he's having swollen lips and hives. Any suggestions? Will DAO help? Enzymes, question mark. That's a hard one, because who knows if that's a side effect of the drug or is that some type of histamine issue?
Yeah, number one, kids, again, I don't know enough about this patient. So this is, take it with a grain of salt. This isn't medical advice. This is just me kind of talking here. So off the bat, kids notoriously have the worst freaking diets in the world. Okay. Yeah. Especially if they go to school and they're eating the school lunch and they're trading with their kids, they eat like crap. So number one, clean up the diet. And again, it's hard because if you're a parent who's not eating healthy, then your house is full of crap. So first thing is the parent, get all the crap out of your house, create a really good environment, have really healthy snacks, get all of the crap out. So get your kid on a paleo template to start. Do that for at least a few weeks to a month. That may fix so many of the issues. But in the meantime, yeah, can you add in enzymes like DAO, Again, maybe hard to get them, but can you add in regular digestive enzymes and HCl? Yes. Can you add in things like stinging nettle and bromelain and N-acetylcysteine and all of the nutrients that I mentioned? Yes, you can. So I would definitely add in all those histamine nutrients. I would try maybe going lower histamine, kind of a paleo template, and really get the diet 100% and make sure they're able to digest their food, HCl, enzymes, all of those really good things. And that's a great starting point. And then from there, if that's still not helping or only getting part of the way there, you want to really get a good functional medicine doc to look deeper at what's happening with the gut and things.
Yeah, well said. That's what my next thing was going to say. I've seen little girls as young as 3 and little boys 4 or 5 years old with massive gut infections, parasites, and H. pylori, and the rest of it. So it's very possible that that's going on in the gut, depending on the history and use of antibiotics in the kid and things like that.
Exactly. Patient here. My mom has been diagnosed with lichen sclerosis. That's an autoimmune condition that affects the skin. I've seen a handful of patients after that, cream after cream. They're probably referring to hydrocortisone or corticosteroid cream. It gets worse. Any tips regarding the root cause of this? Yes, autoimmune. Get the autoimmune stuff dialed in. I'll use some stem cell types of creams like J-Bio Serum is one that I sell that works great. It's got some stem cells in it, but you got to make the diet and lifestyle change. Autoimmune template to start with, and then dig in with all of the functional medicine principles next. What are the symptoms of histamine intolerance? All the things that we mentioned earlier, from swelling to flushing to headaches to rashes. Anything you want to add there, Evan?
Yeah, a fast pulse or
Fast
like
pulse.
a rapid heartbeat. I've had women say they eat a food and then their heart starts racing. So it could be mood issues, could be physical changes as well.
Yeah, and then the best way to test for histamine issues, in my opinion, is I just look at people's symptoms and I connect them to higher histamine foods, and then we just pull those foods down a little bit. And if their symptoms get better, then we know. I think for me, the telltale sign for histamine issues, fermented foods and citrus foods. Those are the big telltale for me, because they're relatively healthy foods. No one's going to say like, oh, eating a grapefruit's bad, or, having some, low sugar kombucha or, some sauerkraut's bad. It's relatively good. But if we're doing that history and we see symptoms of those foods, then we're like, ooh, there probably is a histamine issue.
Yep. Well said. See what else we got here. I'll read a couple off here for you. Does everyone have some degree of histamine tolerance? Don't think I have histamine problems, but not sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, if you say everyone, the average person is very unhealthy. Autoimmune disease is rampant. The standard American diet, which is the same in Australia, the same in Europe, the same in most developed countries, they're following kind of a standard American diet: processed grains, sugars, conventional pasteurized dairy, meats that are not organic. They contain hormones and antibiotics. So yes, most of people are taking ibuprofen and over-the-counter drugs. They're taking steroids and doing antibiotics. They're getting them in the diet. They're doing acid-blocking drugs. They're not sleeping well. They're addicted to their smartphones. So yes, so many people have things in their bucket that, yes, I would say everyone has a degree. Now, kind of our tribe that Justin and I are building of, healthy people that are doing as many right things as possible, they're probably going to have a less risk of a histamine intolerance.
Totally. 100%. Makes sense. And then how about the bone broth stuff? I mean, I see lots of people with issues with bone broth, and that kind of falls in and around the fermented food issue, right? If you're having issues with fermented foods or things that are slowly cooked like bone broth, that can increase histamine and that can create problems. So again, we may hold off on the bone broth or cook it in a way where it's cooked shorter. Well, what kind of preparations for bone broth do you do to help lessen it? I know there are some out there.
Well, I'm spoiled. I haven't been making it because I've been using the kettle and fire bone broth that they sent me. So I literally just have to throw it in a pot and heat it up, and I've been fine. Now I know they slow simmer or slow cook theirs for like 48 something hours. Like it's an extremely long simmer time. So I don't know how that would affect somebody that was sensitive, but for me, I feel quite well with it. I don't have any symptoms.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I haven't had to modify it at all.
Yeah, so a couple, you can skim off the scum on the top of the bone broth. You can skim that out. That may be helpful. You can also do just a shorter brew, maybe an 8 to 12 hour one. That could be good. You can also just try buying some that maybe are higher quality, or they may have a way of, producing it that produces low histamine, like the kettle and fire. So that could be some good options. But again, if you have a food that we consider to be healthy, like bone broth or kombucha or fermented foods, and you can't respond to it, you can always put that food aside. That's kind of like, that's like your free histamine test, right?
Yep.
So you can work on the gut, you can work on a lot of these hormone and diet things, and then you can add that thing. That's your free test to add back in the future. And that's a good objective marker to see how you're doing with your gut. And if it's starting to heal, you may be able to handle more of that.
Yep.
That's
Well
a good marker.
said. I believe my link should still be active. Kettle and Fire sponsored my show for a while. They're not anymore, but they should still be giving people 20% discount. So you can try it. If you do evanbrand.com/chicken, you should be able to get 20% off. So try it out. I think they pay me like $1 if you buy some, but that's good bone broth.
We'll
And they
support the
sent it to
cause.
me.
We'll support the cause. I know the only products that we ever mention on our shows are things we believe in. So again, you guys got to know that we're coming from a place of authenticity. So if you want to support us and we reference something, just know that it's got to go through that filter of actually being a high quality product. And we actually have to use it on ourselves and our friends and family for us to recommend it. So we appreciate that support.
Another question here. What herbs do you suggest for fungal issues? Once again, I'm going to say it depends. And I know Justin would say the same thing, because we're going to make our protocols based on what you're up against. So if it's bacteria plus fungus plus yeast plus parasites, that's going to be far, far more heavy hitting protocol. If it's just fungus by itself, which is not too common because most people have a lot of issues together, you may be able to get away with some garlic or some oregano, or like Justin mentioned earlier, the Burberry or the barberry or the berberines. That whole family can be great. And we've got several formulas. If you just stalk our stores a bit, look on Justin Health and look into his categories, and you can check out mine too. We've got many, many different combinations of herbs. Could you go and technically just buy a couple herbs and just, shoot a shotgun approach and maybe get success? Yes, but I would, of course, advise you get tested, because if you have fungal issues, you probably have other issues too.
Yeah. And here's one like little clinical pearl that I've kind of found over the years. I'll throw it out there for everyone listening. How I know fungal issues are more of an issue for some people than others is, number one, we'll see the fungus on a stool test, which will be helpful. We can see either multiple kinds of yeast or fungus, whether it's Geotrichum, Microsporidia, Candida, etc. We'll see different kinds of species. But also on a organic acid test, we'll see the D-arabinose, which is a metabolite of Candida, but that also kind of means it's gone systemic. It's gone more systemic, and it's going out the urine. So if we see something like D-arabinose that's more of a systemic marker in the urine, and we see it in the gut, then we know that fungal issue is a lot deeper. Now, a lot of fungal issues tend to be driven by other issues like H. pylori and other parasites that are bigger, but some people are just going to have a rip-roaring fungal infection, and we'll see it systemically via the organics as well as on the gut too.
Let me ask you this. I mean, let's say you see somebody with a really, really gross fungus fingernail, like it looks like their fingernail's about to fall off because it's so infected. Would you assume that person's got a massive amount of fungus in the gut and it's manifesting on the nail, on the fingernail?
To a certain degree, I would say that's a good, you can't hurt yourself faulting that, and you're coming to that conclusion. But again, if you knock out some gut stuff, it can be hard for those herbs and for your immune system to get all the way at that peripheral tip of that nail to knock out the infection. So sometimes we got to topically hit things because they just got to travel a long way. So we'll either topically hit herbs there, or we'll have to do some kind of a soak to hit it as well. Even if we were to address the gut, it may not be enough to make its way down there.
Because I've seen that. I don't remember if it was a cashier or somewhere. I saw a guy with his finger, like his index finger, the nail was literally about to come off, and it was completely
There's different
yellow.
degrees, right? There's like I had a slight fungal nail, and I knocked it out with some oil of oregano and a soak in just a few weeks. There's some where it's like the nail is incredibly like sclerotic and
it was extreme, yeah.
Super thick, almost falling off, and then
Yes.
like totally discolored. Like that's like the highest degree. And then you're just like, oh, it's just like a little bit rough, and then it's got a slight yellowish hue.
No, I'm talking when it was like, it looked like if you flicked it, it would
Totally
fly off. Like,
yeah, so you have that's the
going on?
one at an extreme. Then the other extreme is maybe it's just a light. It's kind of like a little bit sclerotic, like it's rough.
Yeah.
And if you were to file it, it would get smooth, but then it would grow out at the bottom again rough. That's how you know it's fungal. And typically it's going to be slightly yellowed. And again, it can go really dark and brown, like dark yellowy brown, the longer it's there. And
So what is that?
Really nasty.
When it's that extreme, I mean, how in the world would that happen? What sets the stage for that? Same
It's
thing,
deeper,
everything we
it's
talked about?
embedded deeper, just chronicity. It's just deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into that nail bed.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Last question here. What does it mean if a rash shows up only on the legs and not other parts of the body?
I have no idea. Again, typically the body's going to just push stuff out. And again, if things are in the body systemically, where or why the body pushes it out there beats me. Maybe that's a stronger area for the body to push it out. Hard to say. Again, as things get worse and worse, problems tend to be more systemic. So I wouldn't worry about why it's there. The fact that it's in a local spot is better. I would just want to make sure there's nothing not a contact dermatitis issue where nothing's contacting that spot. And if nothing's contacting it, I wouldn't worry about it because we're treating the body systemically as a whole to really work on the lymphatics and the detox, so everything will get better.
Yeah, well said. And I mean, in a rash on the legs, that could be so generic. I mean, that could be something from your skincare products. I mean, that could literally be an allergy to parabens or something. My wife, when
a contact dermatitis issue where something's actually touching it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, my wife, she had a reaction on her legs and it had nothing to do with diet or histamine or anything. It was just she had a sample of a skincare product and it must have had some ingredient in it that we didn't know about. And she had a rash on her legs. So don't freak out. Don't think too deeply. It could be something that simple.
Yeah. My baby just had some baby acne. My wife was freaking out about it a little bit, but it's just, he's metabolizing her hormones. So he's getting over it pretty fast, which is good. But again, things happen. And if it's a contact issue, like control all the vectors of what's going on your skin. And then second is like what's in your body and just try to decrease inflammation.
Yep. You got time for one or two more?
Sure. Let's do it.
All right. James, he said he's not allergic to nuts and seeds, but every time he eats peanut butter, he always gets a fungal rash around his glute region.
Don't touch peanut butter, man. I mean, it's known to be higher in aflatoxin. It's a legume as well. So there could be some gut irritating stuff in it. Stay away from that. Switch over to high quality almond butter instead and let us know how that works.
Yeah, there's a brand I use. What is it? Cadia, Cadia. It's like the only organic almond butter I've found that's less than $20 a jar.
I actually created my own brand called Justin's. You see that brand at Whole Foods?
Justin? I did. Good job.
That's my brand. No, I'm just kidding. It's convenient to say it, but no, not my brand. I won't take credit for it, but I do like Justin's. I will do that a little bit sometimes. And I do like just the Whole Food 365. I'll get the organic. It's also a cool one. It's really expensive. It's called Nutso.
I've seen that one.
It's an upside down container. Yeah. So like the lid's on the bottom and it's upside down kind of thing. Yeah, I've seen that's kind of cool. Really expensive, but it's a really nice treat.
Here's another question, a little bit off subject. How is holy basil as an adaptogen for stress? We've done that. I could go so long on this that I'll have to shut myself up right now. You just have to check out our other episodes on adaptogens because I love them. And holy basil, eleuthero, rhodiola, ashwagandha, all the ones you mentioned, we do use all those. They're great.
I think it's good. And it's good to kind of rotate through some or use a combination or use them individually and have a rotation to it. I think that's great.
Yeah. Is water sounding in ears related to histamine?
Potentially. I mean, it could be the first thing I would look at are just food allergens in general, especially mucus producing foods. So like dairy and things, because anytime you get more mucus that can go in the ear and that can create issues, just gluten and inflammatory foods to begin with. So yeah, definitely kind of hit that overall paleo template and you'll hit a lot of those things out.
I think that's it. We should probably wrap it up. We're going to turn into a pumpkin here. If there's any last questions, please ask us.
Yeah, how much salt do you need to ingest for every liter of water you drink to replenish lost nature? I mean, I would just do a half a teaspoon to a teaspoon twice a day of high quality mineral based salt. So like my favorite's real salt, or you can do a Celtic or a Himalayan, just really good minerals that you're going to put back into your body. I like that. Yeah,
I saw a new study about sea salt. I posted up, I think I put it on my Twitter account, where all the sea salt from US and Europe was contaminated with microparticles of plastic. And so I support your idea of using the real salt, which is going to be an inland sea as opposed to the ocean sea salt. That stuff's contaminated. Dr. J, do you think Tom Brady's on a low histamine diet?
Well, let's break down Tom Brady's diet. He eats 20% meat. There's a lot of memes out there. Tom Brady goes vegan. No, you're not vegan if 20% of what you eat's meat. Not even close. But there's a qualifier there. His meat's organic and grass-fed, so there's really good quality meats. He avoids nightshades, tomatoes, potatoes, eggplants, peppers. He eats lots of vegetables. He eats very little starch. He eats a little bit of fruit. So I would say, relatively speaking, yeah, I mean, his kind of thing is, oh, I'm eating acid alkaline kind of thing, right? That may be the result of, that may be what he thinks he's doing, but in my thing is he's really just doing an anti-inflammatory diet.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not worried about acid alkaline. If he was worrying about being alkaline 100%, he'd avoid the meat, right? But we know that meat has a lot of important nutrients, and he's balancing the meat out with a lot of the veggies that are very alkaline. I don't worry about that so much. Most of the acid your body's going to get is from inflammation. Inflammation is like 1,000 times more acidic than actually eating an acid-based food. So I'm more worried about the food's inflammatory qualities than I am about whether it's acid or alkaline. But again, grains are 10 times more acidic than meat. So if I can leverage that conversation or that idea with the patient, I'll say, hey, well, if you really want to be more alkaline, at least meat's 10 times less acidic than grains.
Well said. Well
So
said.
yeah, I would think he would be indirectly, not his goal. But again, anyone that's on an anti-inflammatory diet indirectly would be lower histamine outside of maybe citrus and fermented foods and such.
Yep. Well said. Well, we'll wrap this thing up. We hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have more questions, more ideas, more things that you want to hear us cover in terms of topics, reach out. We've both got contact forms on our website. Send us an
Click
email.
below, subscribe. We appreciate it. Give us a share. Give us a thumbs up.
Yeah, Justin's over 30,000 on the YouTube, man. So great job. Keep it up. Hit the subscribe button so that we can keep pushing out this content and helping you guys achieve the most optimal health on the planet.
Yeah, help us get more people healthy. We really appreciate it. Healthy people make healthy decisions. They're better parents. They're better employees. They're better bosses. They're better everything. So we like it. It helps everyone.
I saw Mark Hyman. He was talking about autoimmunity and how it's twice or even up to 10 times more expensive to take care of a sick patient with autoimmune disease. And so we guys want you to be healthy, because to save our population from collapsing, we're kind of in the midst of a healthcare collapse. Basically, the health of society is falling apart. We're trying to make a healthy dent in the universe by helping you guys. So thanks for the feedback. It means a lot to us.
Love it, Evan. All right, man. Hey, great chat today. Appreciate it.
Take care. Bye.
You too. Take care.